It started as a simple love story. Keisha Thompson, 28 years old, a kind-hearted nursing assistant with a passion for helping others, the kind of woman who made people feel safe. But in matters of the heart, safety is never guaranteed. For months, Keisha had been caught in the middle of something she never saw coming. Two men, two different lives, and one devastating truth that would cost them everything. Darius Johnson, 32 years old, a construction worker with a steady job, a steady routine, and a deep, consuming love for Keisha. To his friends, he was loyal. To his family, he was the responsible one. But to Keisha, Darius was becoming something else entirely. Then there was Jamal Carter, 30 years old, a former athlete turned personal trainer, charismatic, outgoing, always the center of attention, and always dangerously close to Keisha. To the outside world, they were just friends, but behind closed doors, things weren't so simple. Someone had to find out the truth. Someone had to make a choice. And when the truth finally surfaced, it came at a cost no one was prepared to pay. That message was the beginning of the end. When police arrived, 2 bodies were found, a weapon still warm, a room filled with unanswered questions, and Keisha was nowhere to be found. What happened inside that house? Why did love turn into a crime scene? And most importantly, who was hiding the biggest secret of them all? Before we unravel this shocking case, make sure you're subscribed. This is a story you won't forget. In the heart of Liberty Springs, Texas, the air was thick with the scent of freshly cut grass, and the town's old-fashioned charm never failed to put its residents at ease. Here, life moved slowly, families gathering at the corner diner, children playing in the park, and neighbors stopping by each other's homes just to chat. There was a sense of peace here, a sense of normalcy. In a place like this, nothing could go wrong, or so it seemed. But beneath the surface, behind the smiles and the small-town pleasantries, something dark was stirring, something hidden from view, waiting to surface. It would tear apart the very fabric of this community, leaving behind a trail of heartbreak, anger, and death. Keisha Thompson wasn't born in Liberty Springs. She grew up in a much smaller town, where everyone knew everyone, where secrets were rare and hard to keep. Raised by a single mother who worked tirelessly to provide for her, Keisha learned early on how to stand strong in a world that could be unforgiving. But despite the hardships, she carried with her an undeniable warmth, a smile that could light up even the darkest room. People loved her. She made them feel safe. But what most didn't know was that Keisha had always dreamed of more than just living in small-town comfort. She dreamed of adventure, of seeing the world, of becoming someone. After high school, Keisha moved to Liberty Springs, hoping to find a fresh start. It wasn't long before she landed a job as a nursing assistant at the local hospital. The people there were drawn to her, kind, compassionate, always willing to lend a hand. She became the heart of the hospital, the person everyone trusted when they needed help. But while Keisha's life appeared picture-perfect on the outside, inside, she was still searching for love, for stability, for something that would make her feel whole. And that's when Darius Johnson entered her life. Darius Johnson wasn't born in Liberty Springs either, but he made his mark quickly. A man of few words, Darius was known for his hard work and his strength, both physical and emotional. He worked in construction, building homes, fixing foundations, repairing what had been broken. But Darius himself was far from being unbroken. He had his demons, and he didn't hide them. He wore them on his sleeve, in the way he carried himself, in the way he spoke, if he spoke at all. He was a man used to getting what he wanted, and when he saw Keisha, he knew. He knew she was different, and that's exactly why he was drawn to her. Keisha felt it too. Something about Darius's presence, his calm intensity, his confidence. It made her feel safe, wanted, desired. They clicked instantly. It wasn't long before their relationship turned from a friendly connection to something much deeper. But what Keisha didn't know was that Darius had never learned to share, especially not when it came to the people he loved. Enter Jamal Carter. Jamal was the kind of man people noticed. Tall, fit, with an easy smile, and the charisma that drew others to him. He was a personal trainer at the local gym, where Keisha had been working out. It started innocently enough, just a few conversations after a workout, some tips on fitness. Jamal, with his smooth charm and infectious energy, quickly became a fixture in Keisha's life. He made her laugh. He made her feel special in ways Darius, with all his intensity, could not. They became friends, or at least that's how it started. But it wasn't just friendship, not for Jamal, and not for Keisha either. Slowly, something began to change. What had been harmless banter began to feel different. Keisha felt herself drawn to Jamal in ways she hadn't expected. And Darius noticed. He saw the way Keisha looked at Jamal, the way she seemed lighter in his presence, the way she smiled more often when he was around, and that was all Darius could take. He couldn't lose Keisha, not like this. It wasn't just jealousy anymore. It was obsession, and that obsession, when combined with the volatility of love, could only end one way. Someone was going to get hurt. Keisha was stuck between two men, two worlds. One man who promised stability but lacked trust, and another who made her feel alive, but at what cost? The lines between love and betrayal began to blur, and no one knew how deep the danger truly ran until it was too late. Family and friends saw the signs. They saw the tension growing between Keisha, Darius, and Jamal. They tried to warn her, tried to tell her that something wasn't right, but Keisha was already too far into it. The moment of truth was coming, and no one knew how it would unfold, not even Keisha herself. The affair didn't start with fireworks, no grand gestures, no secret declarations of love. It began quietly. A few exchanged texts, an accidental brush of hands in the gym, a glance that lingered a second too long. Keisha Thompson, for all her warmth, had a side to her that longed for more than what Darius could offer. Jamal Carter, with his effortless charm and magnetic presence, became that more, but only in moments stolen in the shadows. At first it was innocent, just small talk after a workout, a compliment here, a laugh there. But Keisha knew the line was being crossed, and she could feel it. Each conversation, each stolen moment, pulling her deeper into something she wasn't ready to confront. Jamal was bold, direct in his attention, and Keisha, though conflicted, couldn't help but feel drawn to him in a way she hadn't experienced before. Late-night texts became a constant. Jamal's words, flirty, smooth, brought a rush of excitement Keisha had been craving. She told herself it was harmless, just a bit of fun. But with each new message, with each hidden rendezvous, the weight of her actions began to settle deeper in her chest. She was betraying Darius, but was it really betrayal? Or was it simply a response to something she felt had been missing for so long? Jamal was relentless, and soon the affair escalated beyond simple texts. The meetings grew more frequent, secret lunches, whispered conversations, moments when Darius was none the wiser. At first, Keisha told herself it wasn't wrong. She justified it, told herself she was simply finding a connection she didn't realize she needed. But deep down, a part of her knew. She knew she was walking on a dangerous path. But nothing stays hidden forever. From the moment Keisha began sneaking around, Darius started to notice the small changes, the ones you can't hide from someone who knows you too well. The subtle shift in her behavior, the way she seemed distracted at times, her phone always hidden away when he was around. Darius wasn't the kind of man who let things slide. He didn't trust easily, and that lack of trust was about to surface in ways Keisha never imagined. At first, he dismissed the suspicion. After all, what did he know? He trusted Keisha. But then came the late nights, the unexplained absences. Keisha's refusal to talk about her whereabouts, and Jamal's name kept popping up, casually, but always there. Darius tried to keep his calm, but the unease was starting to claw at him. It was a feeling, a gut instinct, that no amount of rational thinking could dispel. Then came the confrontation. One evening, as Keisha came home from another late shift, Darius couldn't take it anymore. The pieces had finally clicked into place. The odd behavior, the secrecy, the texts that had started to pile up on her phone. His voice, cold and tight, broke the silence. He asked her outright, with no more pretense, no more games. "Is there something you're not telling me?" For a moment, Keisha didn't know what to say. She couldn't lie. Not now, not to him. But she also couldn't bring herself to admit it, to face the truth of what she'd done. The words hung heavy in the air, suffocating them both. Darius, for all his strength, felt a sharp pang of betrayal that cut through him deeper than any physical wound ever could. He waited for her to speak, to give him something, anything, but Keisha couldn't find the words. It was only a matter of time before Darius found the undeniable proof he needed. A week later, he was digging through Keisha's things, searching for answers. What he found in her drawer was the key, the final piece of the puzzle. There it was, the receipt. A hotel room booked under Jamal's name, the date and time matching one of the late shifts Keisha had been working. It was all there. The lies, the deceit, the affair. Darius was no longer in the dark. He had the proof he needed, but the damage was already done. In that moment, everything changed. The man who once trusted her, loved her, was now filled with an insatiable need for answers, for justice. Darius's rage was no longer about the affair. It was about the betrayal of the one person he had let in. And that betrayal was the spark that would ignite something far more dangerous. On the evening of the murders, everything seemed like it was going to be just another day. But behind the doors of the homes in this small town, emotions were brewing, secrets were festering, and a brutal confrontation was about to take place. Darius Johnson had spent the past few weeks in turmoil. His girlfriend, Keisha Thompson, had been hiding something from him. What started as a whisper of suspicion soon turned into undeniable proof. The affair between Keisha and Jamal Carter, her lover, the man who had crossed into his life and stolen her affections, had become the center of Darius's obsession. He had been pushed to the edge, his trust shattered, and his emotions tangled in jealousy and rage. Keisha's late-night texts, her evasive behavior, and the whispers of a love growing outside their relationship had slowly eaten away at Darius. But what made it worse was the way Jamal began to flaunt their relationship. Darius could no longer ignore the fact that he was being replaced. Keisha's love was no longer just his, and Jamal had become a constant reminder of that. Darius had been driven to the brink. He discovered texts between Keisha and Jamal, sweet words, promises of a future together, and all the signs of a full-blown affair. That's when he made his decision. He would confront Keisha and Jamal, face them, and demand the truth. This was the moment everything changed. On the evening of the murders, Darius knew exactly what he needed to do. He needed closure. He couldn't go on living with the betrayal gnawing at him. But his closure would come at a deadly cost. Darius arranged to meet Keisha and Jamal that evening, at an isolated, quiet location on the outskirts of town, away from prying eyes. He felt justified. He wasn't the one who had caused the destruction. Keisha and Jamal had pushed him to this point. It was around 5:30 p.m. when they all arrived. Darius's truck parked first, his eyes scanning the dark parking lot. Then, Keisha's car appeared, followed by Jamal's, both cars gliding silently into place. The tension was thick, palpable, each of them knowing that the meeting would bring no easy words, only confrontation, but none of them understood just how far this would go. Darius got out of his truck and walked straight toward Keisha. His voice was cold, controlled, but his eyes betrayed the storm inside him. He demanded answers, accusations spilling from his lips. Keisha, caught off guard, tried to defend herself, but her words were no match for the fury building inside Darius. And when Jamal stepped forward to intervene, the situation escalated even further. Jamal, ever the defender of his relationship with Keisha, tried to calm Darius down, but only made him angrier. Darius had reached his breaking point. The words that had once seemed like whispers of a problem now felt like the roar of a flood. His mind raced. Images of betrayal, of Keisha and Jamal laughing behind his back, flooded his thoughts. He couldn't think straight. His jealousy, his rage, everything exploded in that moment. In one swift, fluid motion, Darius reached into the glove compartment of his truck and grabbed the gun. Without hesitation, he pointed it at Jamal. The first shot rang out, echoing in the air, the sound piercing the stillness of the evening. Jamal dropped to the ground immediately, blood spilling onto the cold concrete. His body was still, lifeless, before he even hit the ground. Keisha screamed, the sound of her voice filling the empty parking lot. But Darius didn't stop. His rage was blinding. He turned toward Keisha, his lover, the woman who had betrayed him, and without a moment's pause, fired the second shot. The bullet struck her, and she fell, her body crumpling to the ground, the life drained from her eyes, her body motionless in a matter of seconds. In the span of mere moments, Darius had killed both of them, the woman he loved and the man who had stolen her from him. The weight of his actions bore down on him, but it didn't stop him. He knew he had gone too far, but there was no turning back. Blood was now on his hands. Moments passed in silence. Darius stood frozen, staring at what he had just done. But then, the reality of the situation hit him. The sounds of his breathing seemed louder than anything else in the world. The town would soon hear about this. The police would be coming. His escape would be difficult, but he was desperate. He jumped into his truck and sped away, the wheels screeching as he vanished into the night. A few minutes later, a 911 call was made. A woman's voice, frantic and desperate, screamed into the phone. The dispatcher asked for details, but the voice was barely coherent, unable to provide much beyond a plea for help. "2 people are shot. Please, help!" By the time the police arrived, Keisha and Jamal were already dead. The officers immediately secured the area, noting the weapon left behind. Darius's gun. It was all too clear. This was not a random act. It was a calculated, personal act of rage. A crime fueled by betrayal, jealousy, and anger. As the investigation began, detectives found key evidence that would unravel the entire truth. Blood patterns at the scene confirmed the close-range execution. Surveillance footage from a nearby store showed Darius's truck near the crime scene at the exact time of the murders, and phone records revealed the incriminating calls made by Darius to Keisha and Jamal in the hours before the killings. After a tense interrogation, Darius finally broke down. His alibi fell apart. The inconsistencies in his story, his nervous movements, and his eventual confession sealed his fate. Darius Johnson admitted to the murders. He had killed Keisha and Jamal, unable to control his rage after the betrayal. The truth was clear. 2 lives were lost that day, lives that could never be replaced. And for Darius Johnson, his crime would be remembered as the result of love, loss, and an irreversible act of violence. The trial of Darius Johnson had gripped the entire town of Texas. But more than that, it had captured the attention of the entire nation. The brutal murders of Keisha Thompson and Jamal Carter were no longer just a local tragedy. They were a spectacle, a courtroom drama unlike any other. Keisha's family, devastated by the senseless loss of their loved one, sat in the front row, each one struggling to find a way to cope with the grief. Her mother, in particular, could barely keep her composure. The realization that Keisha would never walk through their door again weighed heavily on them. Their pain was on display for the world to see, an audience caught between disbelief and horror. As the trial opened, it became clear this would not be a simple case of murder. The facts were shocking, the emotions raw, but the question of why, that was where the real battle would unfold. The prosecution and defense would clash fiercely, each side presenting their own version of the truth. Prosecutor LaToya Evans wasted no time. She laid out the evidence with precision, her voice steady as she highlighted the blood-stained crime scene, the forensic reports, and the damning phone records. The messages exchanged between Keisha and Jamal, texts filled with promises of a future together, the gun that had been found at the scene, the one Darius had used to take 2 lives in a fit of jealousy. Evans painted a clear picture. This wasn't a crime of passion. This was murder, cold and calculated, a moment where a man chose to end 2 lives because he couldn't bear the thought of betrayal. On the other side of the courtroom stood defense attorney Terrence Miller, a man with a different story to tell. Miller didn't deny that Darius had killed Keisha and Jamal, but he argued that the crime was not premeditated. He painted the picture of a man driven to the brink of madness by the betrayal of his fiancée. This wasn't murder in cold blood, Miller argued. This was a crime of passion, a desperate act driven by love and rage, a man who snapped, unable to handle the emotional torment of being left behind. Miller's argument stirred doubt in the minds of some. Was this truly a crime of passion, or was Darius Johnson a man who, unable to accept the betrayal, had executed 2 people in cold blood? The lines between justification and guilt were blurred, and the jury would have to decide which version of the truth to believe. Several key witnesses took the stand. Friends of Keisha testified about the strain in her relationship with Darius. She didn't seem happy, one friend recalled. She was distant, constantly worried about Darius finding out about Jamal. Another witness, a neighbor, described overhearing heated arguments through the walls of their apartment. There were times when I heard Darius shouting, telling her he knew everything. These testimonies painted a portrait of a relationship on the brink of collapse. Detective Marcus Reed, who had led the investigation, explained the key pieces of evidence that had been uncovered. The blood patterns at the scene indicated close-range gunfire. The weapon recovered was registered to Darius Johnson. We also found text messages between the defendant and both victims that indicated a growing level of hostility in the days leading up to the murder. Detective Reed's testimony was a devastating blow to the defense, highlighting that Darius's actions were not those of a man acting out of uncontrolled passion, but of a man who had premeditated and executed a cold, calculated crime. Hours stretched into days as the jury deliberated. The tension in the courtroom was thick as they weighed the evidence. Would they believe the defense's claim of a crime of passion, or would they convict Darius for the cold, premeditated murder of 2 people? The stakes were high, and for Keisha's family, every passing minute felt like an eternity. They had waited so long for justice, but now the fate of Darius Johnson was in the hands of 12 strangers. The jury had reached a verdict. The silence in the courtroom was deafening as the judge called for the decision to be read. We, the jury, find the defendant, Darius Johnson, guilty of 2 counts of first-degree murder. Darius Johnson was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Justice, however, couldn't undo the loss felt by Keisha's family, nor could it erase the violent act that had destroyed 2 lives. In the end, the courtroom was silent, but the weight of the crime would echo forever. The aftermath of this brutal crime left scars that would never fade. While the gavel had fallen, justice, in its cold, formal way, could not heal the wounds that had been inflicted. Keisha's family, her friends, and the entire community found themselves grappling with a pain so deep it would echo through their lives forever. They would never be the same. Angela Thompson, Keisha's mother, sat in the same living room that once echoed with the laughter of her daughter. She had raised Keisha, taught her values, and watched her grow into a beautiful woman. But now, all Angela had were memories and the crushing emptiness of her daughter's absence. I don't know how to go on without her. She was my only child. I thought that maybe one day she would come back. But she's gone. My baby is gone, and all because of a lie, because of betrayal. And then there was Jamal Carter's family. They too were devastated, caught in a nightmare they never saw coming. Jamal, a man with a bright future ahead of him, was also taken far too soon. His mother, his sister, those who had known him as a loving, ambitious young man, now struggled with the reality of his murder. To them, Jamal was more than a victim. He was a son, a brother, and a piece of their lives that could never be replaced. He wasn't just someone my daughter loved. He was someone my son was meant to be. I'll never get to hold my son again. I'll never hear his voice. And for what? Over a secret affair? A betrayal? My boy didn't deserve this. The small town where Keisha, Darius, and Jamal had once lived their lives was now a shadow of its former self. The crime had shocked not only those directly involved, but it sent ripples of fear and unease throughout the entire community. Neighbors turned into strangers. The safety they once felt walking down these quiet streets had been shattered. Trust had been broken in ways that would take generations to heal. Even the church, once a place of solace, was no longer immune to the darkness. The scandal of the affair, the brutality of the murders, had touched every corner of this community. How could they look at each other the same way after what had happened? How could they trust again when betrayal was at the very heart of this tragedy? Neighbors talked in whispers, barely able to speak of the names that had once been synonymous with trust and love. It was as though the town itself had become haunted by the memories of the two lives lost. They said it would take years, maybe even decades, for the scars of this crime to fade, but some wounds never truly heal. The whispers didn't end with the trial. The question that lingered in the minds of so many was simple. How could something like this happen? How could love, once pure and trusting, devolve into such horrific betrayal and violence? And perhaps more troubling, how many people had seen the signs but ignored them? There were signs. Keisha's friends remembered how she'd spoken of Darius's increasing jealousy, how she'd confided in them about the strain in her relationship. Jamal, too, had begun to show signs of obsession, but at what point did it become too late to stop what was already set in motion? This crime was not just an isolated incident, it was the result of unresolved pain, unspoken truths, and a series of decisions made in the shadows. This tragedy serves as a stark reminder that the cost of betrayal is far higher than anyone expects. What began as a secret affair, an emotional escape, spiraled into something far more destructive than anyone could have foreseen. Lives were shattered, families torn apart, and a community forever changed. Perhaps the hardest lesson to learn from Keisha and Jamal's story is this. Betrayal may seem like a fleeting moment, a temporary lapse in judgment, but it has the power to destroy everything in its wake. And in the end, no one is left untouched. And now, as we stand at the end of this twisted tale, the question that lingers in the air is simple. Was this crime inevitable, or could it have been prevented? Was the tragedy of Keisha and Jamal's deaths something that was bound to happen the moment those fateful decisions were made? Or were there moments, small signs, whispers of warning, that if acted upon, could have changed the course of history? We may never know. What we do know is this. What began as a love triangle, as a clash of desires and secrets, escalated into something far darker than anyone anticipated. The line between passion and obsession is thin. And sometimes it only takes one moment, one mistake, to change everything. Could it have been stopped? Perhaps, but only if someone had. But the truth remains, love should never lead to death. And yet, in this quiet Texas town, it did. A story of passion, betrayal, and tragedy. A story that left behind broken hearts and shattered lives. In the end, the love that once seemed so pure turned into something far darker, something none of them could escape. And now, the echoes of that fateful night will forever haunt the streets of this small town.
Sometimes, the deepest scars aren't the ones you see on the outside. They're the ones that leave a permanent mark on the heart and on the soul.
In the end, love should never lead to death. But in this Texas town, it did. And that's a lesson none of them will ever forget. Thank you for watching. If you've been captivated by this story and want to hear more twisted true crime cases, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Your support helps this channel grow, bringing you more gripping stories like this one. And if you found this story shocking, go ahead and give it a thumbs up. It'll help more people discover this chilling case. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Did you see the signs of the crime before it happened? Or do you think this was an unavoidable tragedy? Share with your friends, and together, let's keep uncovering the truth. Until next time, stay safe and always stay aware.